Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Claire Bradley, and I am the Director of Irish Studies here at the International Institute of Genealogical Studies. Our website is genealogicalstudies.com, and this is the July 2025 virtual meeting for our Irish course. Today's topic is a look at Irish county archives. And this subject is dealt with differently in Northern Ireland versus the Republic of Ireland. So just briefly want to explain that. In Northern Ireland, and here's a reminder of the counties that are in both jurisdictions, so Northern Ireland, Antrim, Armagh, Derry, Down, Fermanagh and Tyrone, and the Republic of Ireland is the other 26 counties on the island. They don't have the same administrative structure. So county archives aren't really a thing in Northern Ireland. Everything is bundled together in PRONI, the Public Record Office of Northern Ireland, which is, of course, in Belfast. But in the Republic of Ireland, things work a little differently. And that's what I want to talk about today. So we have the 26 counties that are in the Republic, and each one has a local county council. Now, the county council is the main administrative division in Ireland. So it's local government. It manages planning, roads, waste, environmental issues, natural and built heritage in each of the counties for that area. So if there was a pothole in the road, you would contact your local council about that rather than the national government. Now, attached to each county council is a county library and a county archive. Now, sometimes those two entities are bundled together. Sometimes they're two separate entities, and you also see the name local studies used for some of them instead of a clear delineation between the library and the archives. And I think that's no harm, because sometimes people are confused. What's in a library? What's in an archive? What's the difference? I mean, on a very top level, you're going to expect to find more books in the library than in an archive, but that doesn't necessarily mean there won't be any books in the archive. So the basic difference between the archive part and the library part is that the archive part will also house administrative material pertaining to the running of that area. So you might find the minutes of the local county council in the archive, whereas the library is more of a hodgepodge of what they've collected, what's been donated over the years, and so on. So all county libraries will have an excellent collection of local history books, often much more than you'd get in a more general library. And so these will include things that were like privately published in small print runs. It may not have been accessible elsewhere. You might get local journals that never really made it outside the area. Now, because Dublin is the capital city of the Republic of Ireland, and it holds more than a third of the population of the country, it actually has 4 local administrative authorities. So for all the other counties, there's just one county council and usually one body. And then Dublin is the exception because it is divided into 4 for management purposes. And so we have Dublin City Library and Archives, which the clue is in the name. It mainly covers the city centre. Then Fingal Local Studies and Archives, we're going to look at that in a minute. That covers North County Dublin. Dún Laoghaire-Rathdown Archives covers the area around Dún Laoghaire. And then there's also South County Dublin Archives. So it can be, for someone who's not used to these terminologies, confusing to know which one you need to look at for Dublin. And in fact, you realistically need to look at them all because there are some weird successors. For example, Fingal Local Studies and Archives, covering, as I said, the north of the county, holds the minutes for Dublin Corporation. So Dublin Corporation is the name that we used to use for the City Council of Dublin. And in fact, most people in Dublin would still talk about the corporation when they meant something to do with rubbish being collected, or, I'd have to talk to the corpo about that, they'd say. So, but for some reason, and it's something to do with the way these organizations were sort of devolved from each other, Fingal has ended up with the Dublin Corporation minutes from 1899 to 1994. So you might need to look at one more than another. Certainly Dublin City Council, that that one is one that you're always going to be looking at for the city, but you will find random things in it that are not necessarily precisely to do with the city. So that's just a little snapshot of Dublin. But the starting point for each of these county archives or county libraries is their website. And we're going to look at some websites this afternoon and demo them. Many of these organisations are run on small budgets, and they also only have a small number of staff. We might be talking about 3-4 members of staff, perhaps not all of them full time. There's usually, or there should be, a county archivist in each organisation. Sometimes that role is vacant, and there'll also be some sort of senior librarian, and then there'll be other staff who are doing other work. So the websites of these organizations they're not uniform, and it's an area that I find when I'm going through, and you'll know that I've been revising all of our course material here at the Institute. A lot of these organizations have been redeveloping their websites in the last couple of years. So, sometimes I'll find that what was the website 2 years ago is a totally changed URL now, and you have to Google and find the new version of it. This is a particular picture I put in of me in Fingal Archives last year. We were doing a fun evening of culture, and the newspaper was there, and they said, let's build a tower of old bound newspapers and you can peek through it, and I just thought it was a fun photograph. So a lot of these local archives, their websites are not going to be what we would call brilliant. Some of them are really just a brochure website, which means it's here we are, we exist, here's our contact details, here's a couple of paragraphs about what we have, and then you have to contact them for more details. So most of them do not have a catalogue like you would look at on the National Library's website or the National Archives website. They don't have that online most of the time. So what you do need to do is contact these people to discuss it. And as I said, the website links have often changed. If you come across one that's changed and it's in our course material, please do let us know. As always, we're always encouraging our students to go outside the material and do their own homework. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hop over to the internet, which hopefully will work. Hopefully you can see the screen has changed. Just please let me know if you can't. And this is the website for Fingal Local Studies and Archives, and they have right at the top. So it's really just one enormous long page, and they have a picture of their building, which is nice and helpful if you're going to go there. And so what they have is, this is really a brochure website, but they've got quite a lot of detail on it. So they give a little bit about what they do, who they're for, and what do they have. And they make a distinction between their local studies collection and their archive collection, okay? And so this is one that is the combined version, the library and the archive together. So they say they've got photos, postcards, maps, artwork. They have a lot of local history books, periodicals, reference works, and a lot of genealogical books. They have hard copy versions of a newspaper, which is now defunct. They're the only hard copy versions of them. And they have loads, they have a really great collection of trade directories. It's something I often will go into them to look at because they're not too far away from me. And then they say that they have ephemera, so they've got military medals, various bits and pieces. Now they do say that their local studies collection could be searched on the main library catalogue, but I find that a little bit confusing to use myself. And then the archive section, this is what I said, mentioning the successor information. So they have records of local government in County Dublin, which is the whole of the county, from 1775 to the present day. And they also have private, family and estate papers. Excuse me. They say work underway at the creation of an online archival catalogue, but they're very happy to answer questions. They're very responsive by email. And so then just to give you a snippet of what they have, they give you some details. So they mention they have some things to do with turnpike trusts, which are toll roads in Dublin. And you can see there's some quite early dates there. They mention that they have a large collection of material to do with Howth Harbour, which is a fishing harbour in the north of the county. They have the grand jury records for Dublin, which are minutes, grand jury presentments, all sorts of things there, and they are broken up. And then they also have some details linking off. So what they'll do on this website is a lot of the time they'll link off to something else that explains things. So we've talked before about workhouses. There was a workhouse in Balrotherry, which is in the north of the county, and they have some minute books. Now, a sad story here. Workhouse records, usually what you want is to find the admissions and discharge register. And during the Civil War, the town of Balbriggan, which is adjacent to Balrotherry, was sacked. And they put the records of these, they took them away for safekeeping, as in, like, this is in the oral memory of the town. They said, we're going to take these books away. They're going to be put away for safekeeping. Where do they put them? No one knows. They're probably in someone's attic somewhere still. So they have the minute books, but they're not the genealogical gold that the admissions and discharge register are. They also have rural district council records. So these are minute books, and they contain details of, who worked on the land, sometimes the residents of the land, and so on. And then they also have various other categories. And this is the city council books that I mentioned as well. So they also have private papers, and they mentioned some of these names here, some of the big families of North County Dublin. And they also have, this is very interesting, they don't have the Talbot paper. So Malahide Castle is in the area, and the Talbot family were one of the big families of the North County. And the original archive of the Talbot family is actually held by the Bodleian Library in Oxford, but Fingal bought digital reproductions of many of their files. So they have estate leases. This is rent roll. So if you knew that your family lived in the Malahide area, this would be an area that you would want to look at. They also then give you details of how you can arrange to visit them, details of accessibility. All of the archives and local studies aim to be completely accessible. So they will always have information about that on their website. Most of these archives and local studies bodies will want you to make an appointment. And that's just simply because many of them are housed in small spaces, and they need to make sure that there's a table and chair available for everyone who wants to come on a given day. So these are the contact details. And then they also go off and mention that they have on their YouTube channel a bunch of recorded talks that pertain to the area. And then they also say that if you're in the archives, you can use things like Find My Past, the Irish Newspaper Archive, and so on for free. So they have academic subscriptions for them, and people can go in and use their computers. And they also mention, I've lost the link to it, but they have, yes, here it is, their website Buried in Fingal, which is a database of existing burial registers that are in the cemeteries that are in the care of Fingal County Council, and it goes up to 2013. So that's a fantastic site if you're ever looking for people who were buried in North County Dublin. So you can see that they also link to exhibitions and things that they've had in the past, but what you can't do on this website is do any searching. There's not a catalogue for you to look at. You really need to contact them and go, hey, what do you have that might be relevant for me? But not all archives are like that. So I want to show you some that are a bit more advanced. And here we have Tipperary studies, Tipperary is a big county in the Midlands in Ireland. And this website is much more developed than the Fingal one that we just looked at. And they've been putting a lot of work into it. And you can see it's not at all uniform what they have. And from the menus, it's not very clear. But if you click on this local studies, they give some details, and then they say that they have digital archives, and then they break it down on it. If you were visiting the archive directly, here's where you'd find the information. Here's some stuff on genealogy. And then if we go to the collections, they have a load of different collections, and then they also show their publications. So if we go back to the collections tab, you can see here they link directly off to a few things that they have. Now, not all of them are clear about what they are. You need to click on each one to get a bit of detail. So we just talked about the workhouse records in North County Dublin. They have poor law union records here. So they give a little bit of information. I think it's a very small print. I think it perhaps could be better laid out with, better headings and so on. But what they're saying here is there are different poor law unions in Tipperary, and these are the names of them. And here's the information that they have about them. So in some cases, they're saying they have got registers, and in some cases, they're just saying they've got minute books. But they are, again, they're not searchable on the site. They require you to go in and visit them. But they do have quite a lot of things digitized here. So let me just go back one step. So if you go to the browse items, they actually have apparently got 782 pages of, many of them are photographs. So I think 782 is a slightly misleading look at what they have. But once you go into this, if you go to this collection tree, this is the easiest way to browse it, I find. And so here, click on any collection name to open it and get more detail on it. And so here we have information about people who are being boycotted. We have court stuff. We have gravestone memorial. So they have details of what gravestone records they have on the website. Now let me just go down to the school records. I like these. So in Ireland, the word national school means the primary education, elementary education, as you would call it in the USA. So this is for children, they're starting school, and national school, you still hear that phrase, and a lot of schools are still called the something national school of an area. And these are school records for a particular place, in Tipperary. So we'll just click on this one. And you can see here, this is Kilcash National School, and they have records from 1872 to 1929. And they give a little bit of history saying the school existed from 1814. It was funded by Lord Ormond, and then later on it became under the national school system after the Education Act of 1831. It mentions the buildings. And then if we go down, you can see that they actually have digitized material. So they have redacted some information, that's presumably for data protection reasons, but you can actually go into this. It opens it up as a PDF, and it's a very big file, so it takes a while to download, and they've scanned it all in color, and you can go through it and read what it says. So this is essentially, when you went into school every day, the roll would be read out to check attendance, and this was that record. And you can see here that they've got information about the people's names and so on. This is the boys' school for that area. So this is, the school registers are a thing that you will often find in a county archive. And so even though school was run at a national level, often the school was incorporated as its own entity, and therefore the material doesn't make its way into the Department of Education records that are housed in the National Archives. So they often end up in county archives instead. And school registers can be really useful because, of course, we don't have our 19th century census in Ireland, but we do sometimes have a school register, and a school register is going to have a lot of names. You're going to be able to track children through a family on them, and not a lot of these are digitized. This is not something that has really been exploited properly yet as a resource for genealogy, and that's because it's not centralized. You would really need to contact every school that has, you know, a history of more than, say, 100 years. You'd need to contact every county archive and go, what do you have? And it would require a lot of organization for someone to digitize them together. So anyway, there's an awful lot of material on Tipperary's site, and you can see they also have some rent rolls, estate rentals. So this is the sort of thing that if your ancestors worked on a particular land belonging to a particular family, you might find information in their estate rentals for them. And then they also have lovely maps and so on. And not all of these things that are digitized, there will be more offline always, so that they're never going to be able to digitize everything that they have in an archive. That's just not realistic. It doesn't bode well for them if they do that. So they'll try and put something up that's of real value to a lot of people, and then they'll invite you to come in to look at things that are perhaps smaller. This looks very interesting, doesn't it? Someone who was a watchmaker and jeweler in Thurles, and his books of his work. That sounds fascinating. Now I want to come on to my last example for today, which is the Limerick archives. And I've spent a lot of time over the years looking at the Limerick records because I have Limerick ancestors myself. And this is the archives, and this is one of the counties where there's two different websites. So this is the digital archives, and what you can see here is that they have stuff to do with, like I said, Limerick Corporation, and then its successor, Limerick City Council, and these are minute books, and then they have things to do with the workhouses, Board of Guardian minutes, etc. They have rate books, so people who are paying rates on property. They have lovely registration of motor vehicles, successful vaccination records, very interesting. So that sort of thing. And then if we go back and just look at the private papers, they also have some stuff to do with hospitals, they have estate papers and so on. And it's really, they're not giving you a lot of detail there on what they have. You really have to dive into it. So for example, they talk about the Religious Society of Friends, the Quakers, and there's been a small Quaker community in Limerick, and they have a bit of detail about them there. And you can see their website's not fully up to date because they say this is under maintenance and the collection will be fully available again in January 2024. So we don't know at the moment if that is the full collection or whether they've forgotten to take that away. So then they have lots of details there and that you can dive into. But there is, as well as that, there's also the Limerick Local Studies collections. So this is a different website. And again, this is a little bit confusing because they don't necessarily on this site link to this one, and yet you need to look at both of them for the county. And so this is, not everything on this site is digitized either, but they are going to tell you what they have, which I think is really interesting. So they have an extensive collection of journals, and you can see that they said they've divided them into Limerick related journals, parish community journals, national journals, and journals from somewhere else. And they also have a family history collection. Now, this is a little bit deceptive because what they're saying here is, here's a bunch of books we have in the library, and some of these things are digitized and some of them are not. So by all means look at it, but it's a little bit, as I said, deceptive. Some of the journals, though, they do actually have them digitized. So again, this is an enormous long website. I just want to come down to this one, the Old Limerick Journal, which is a journal that has been published by the Old Limerick Society since 1979. It was quarterly, but it's annual since 1992. And you can see that they actually have every journal scanned, which is amazing. And so not only do they have it scanned, but they have a very nice index of what's in the journal. So this is essentially the contents page, and then you can go in and look at the actual journal. So I made great use of this because one of my ancestors, there was an article about him in one of these journals, and I was able to get a copy of it through this site. Now, there's other bits on this site that are really good for genealogy, and I want to take the time to point them out to you now. So if we go to this genealogy section of it, and they mentioned this family history collection that they have, but this here is what we want. This is absolute gold. So this is a work that they've been working on for a long time, and this is a new version of it that's been updated quite recently. So this is every death notice in the Limerick Chronicle newspaper and also some other Limerick newspapers from 1781 to 1951. So it's not just the notice of someone's death, but if there's an obituary, if there's a funeral report or anything to do with someone dying in Limerick, they have got it. I love this note. They mentioned that a Norwegian person got in touch to say they'd found a lost ancestor about whom they could previously find no information, but he had accidentally drowned in Limerick docks, and their website helped them find what happened. So they've done it two ways. You can do a little search. So what I'm going to do here is just put in Joyce, and you can see here straight away that it brings up all the entries that have Joyce, and there's a way to export them if you want. And if you wanted to drill down to someone in particular who was called Joyce, you could put their first name in as well. But I just want to show you the breadth of it. So here, for example, here's a Dr. Patrick Weston Joyce, who was from Ballyorgan in Kilmallock. He died in 1914, and it mentions that he's a scholar. There's an obituary, and there's condolences and a news report. This here is someone who's in my family, actually, Joseph Patrick Joyce, and he died in 1914, age 21. And thinking of, it's before the war, so it's not a war death. But he was the son of my ancestor, so not my direct ancestor, but my direct ancestor's brother. And he died, he had an operation, and he died after the operation. But because his father was a prominent man in Limerick, they mentioned his death, they mentioned a funeral report, and then they also had little acknowledgements. So various different organisations in Limerick voting to offer their condolences to the family because his father was prominent. So this is just a transcription, but I want to point this out because it's not totally clear. View the newspaper cuttings. They have actually digitized them all as well. So if we go all the way down here to 1914, which we were just looking at, and then it indexes out all the names that are in the 1914 records. And, oh, I've gone too far. There he is there. So here's Joseph Patrick, and it mentions here, first of all, this is his death notice, and it brings you up, and you see here there is the death of Mr. W. Joyce, and they put the details in, and a full report about him, which is quite sad. And then here's the sort of thing I mentioned. At a meeting of the committee of the Harbour Board held today, Mr. J. Ellis Goodbody in the chair, Mr. Morley proposed, and Mr. J.P. Goodbody seconded the following, that was passed unanimously: that the very sincere sympathy of the committee be conveyed to Alderman Joyce MP on the sudden bereavement on the death of his son. So a lot of detail there. But I mean, and this is someone who's prominent, but there's still lots of information about people who are not prominent. And I have been able to piece together great stuff about Limerick just from this database alone. And this is all there on their website for free. So you can see from what I've been talking about that there is a vast range of what's available in the different county archives, and some of them require a bit more effort to get the information, and some of them have the information there on their website already. But I guarantee you, as good as this Limerick website is, there'll be much more in person if you need to. So I recommend starting with, oh, I'm interested in this county, having a look at their website, but then don't be afraid to either pick up the phone or send them an email and say, hey, my ancestors from this area, what material might you have? Because the local archivists for these different counties, they make it their business to learn about their county archive, what they know, what's there. And they also are engaged in buying material for their archive as well. So if they're looking at auctions that are online, and they're seeing, for example, the family who lived in Howth Castle, they sold their property not so long ago. There was a big auction of material that was in the house. Some of it, of course, was art and furniture, and some of it was paperwork. And Fingal Local Studies put in bids to try and buy certain things that they felt would be useful for the archive to have, as a part of the cultural heritage of that area. So they all have a remit to expand what they have and to learn more about what they have. And that's why they will all have a series of talks every year and workshops and so on. So the website is really just the jumping off point. And this is, as of course we are advanced students at this point, it is really an area where, we're not going to do your homework for you. We're going to tell you, yes, the archive exists, and there is a full list in our Irish Archival Records course, which is one of the beginner series of courses that we have in our Irish course. That one has a full list of all the different county archives and the websites, which of course were correct at time of printing, but might now be needing to be updated. So take a look at that course material to find them, or just Google the name of the county plus county archive, county library, and you'll find it quick enough that way as well. Now I have a couple of minutes before we finish for questions, but before I stop the recording, I want to thank you all for coming today to today's class, which was presented by the International Institute of Genealogical Studies, and you can find us at genealogicalstudies.com. Thank you.